1961 by Robert P. Fitton. The evidence is clear, and the hour is late. We and our Latin friends will have to face the fact that we cannot postpone any longer the real issue of survival of freedom in this hemisphere itself. On that issue, unlike perhaps some others, there can be no middle ground. Together we must build a hemisphere where freedom can flourish, and where any free nation under the outside attack of any kind can be assured that all our resources stand ready to respond to any request for assistance. The Bay of Pigs invasion speech, John F. Kennedy, addressed to the AANE, April 20th, 1961. Chapter 1, Part 1. Interstate 80, Northern California, July 17th, 1986, 3:30 p.m. Consider time travel a risky venture. In July of 1986, Patch Kincaid turned 30 and had twice traveled back in time. They first sent him to 1976. Retrograde's elastic effect of being snapped back into the present returned him safely to Sector 13 in 4 hours and garnered him the distinction as the first man to successfully survive a trip through time. Classified Sector Report 3517 stated that 11 men had died in previous attempts. The public would never know about those deaths, nor would they celebrate his triumph. The only time travel remnant was the massive power outages when the electric grid overloaded during retrograde. Patch just thought himself damn lucky to have survived, but like absorbing an aphrodisiac, he stepped into the chamber again and ventured back to 1979. His orders were the same as the first trip. Do nothing, touch nothing, let the video capture a Midwestern cornfield 7 years back in time from the embarking chamber at Sector 13. The question of actually changing the flow of time was still not settled. He dreamed about traveling back in time as he watched the jets taking off and landing with his dad. As a boy, for the first 10 years of his life, he and his family were stationed with his dad at the naval base in Atsugi, Japan. He was baptized Robert Garrison Kincaid, Jr., but at age 8, his eye was covered by a patch for 4 weeks when he was hit by a wild-pitch baseball. An American Marine's quick action with an ice block from a nearby restaurant saved his vision. For the rest of his life, he carried a thin 4-inch scar under his right eye and the nickname Patch. Being around all the aircraft at the naval base made Patch want to become a pilot. The boys in school would tell stories about the U-2 spy plane housed at the base. He knew he wanted to fly high, fly fast, and leave the Earth. Later, when the U-2 was brought down over the old Soviet Union in 1960, he began outlining stories about the U-2 going back in time. In high school back in Kansas, he tried to stitch Einstein's theories in quantum mechanics into his imagined homemade time travel device. There had to be a way to go back in time like Rod Taylor in The Time Machine. As a man, he settled for flying high-speed aircraft and then secret missions into space, believing that leaving the bounds of Earth might just be the closest experience to journeying back through time. Project High Platform was conceived at the time as the space shuttle program in the early 1970s. As Patch watched Al Devins and Rick Petrie soar into space on the first shuttle in 1978, he had to keep secret the project he had been a part of since 1977. The shuttle landed successfully at Edwards Dry Lake in Southern California, and Patch drove north to a hidden military base called Catapult 35. Since the beginning of the space program, a secondary program was underway to gain a surreptitious military presence around the Earth and Moon. He joined 26 other astronauts over several decades in being launched high above the Earth to construct military readiness platforms, MRPs. Patch was deeply involved in the facility that remained behind the dark side of the moon. All space flights, traveling at almost 18,000 miles per hour at the MRP facilities, could not prepare him for the perils of time travel. Assignment to the Sector 13 experiments was something he quickly rebuffed. He was not convinced until an intelligence agency physicist, Ray Meinkewitz, spoke with him for 5 hours in San Francisco. Meinkewitz constantly smoked a cigar and told Patch he did not have the guts to attempt time travel. Patch was unpatriotic and selfish, Meinkewitz ranted. He stressed that time travel might have military implications. Meinkewitz sprung a few Bible quotes on him. Then he extolled Patch's bravery and expertise in space. He successfully signed up Patch for a project that would be burrowed away from the general public. Sector 13 demanded never-ending toil and high energy levels that neither rewarded achievement nor granted much free time. Patch worked on the high-powered accelerators, participated in constant testing, and even went around the country soliciting funds from prominent lobbyists and those in power. But in less than a month, he would leave the project and return to civilian life to test a new commercial aircraft for Norcross Air. He cornered Meinkewitz after the trip back to 1979 and was baffled at how easily he secured a few weeks away. Maybe Meinkewitz figured because of his pending discharge, he could allow Patch some private time. He met with Norcross in Chicago, stopped to see his father's grave in Kansas, and now was headed to Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. Kate had finished her doctorate and was also ready for change. In San Francisco, Patch would ask her to marry him. The cooler, fresh mountain air flared through the open window as Patch maneuvered his 5-speed Suburban up the long asphalt stretch above the Truckee River. It was only 200 miles to Golden Gate Park, where he would meet Kate tomorrow morning. Over a month had passed since he had stared into her earthy green eyes and touched her long dark hair. In his mind, he replayed their making love back in her New York apartment and could almost feel her tight body. He smiled at the thought, turned on the radio, and scanned the dial for the Kennedy program. He found it on a scratchy AM station. Patch turned up the volume and the static. The former president maintained the most listened-to radio program in the United States.
Is 90 miles from our shores. Now, firstly, I have a personal experience not putting 100% trust in all military advisors. Vietnam, to address your assertion, was not part of the national interest of the United States. I think it was the general feeling in 1965 when we began to bring our forces back. President Nixon said it was a mistake to bring the boys back. He said that at the time, yes. I won't belabor that point, but I will say that the momentous initiatives of Mr. Nixon, both to China and to the former Soviet Union, stabilized the world situation that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union and led to terrorism. Yes, there are ramifications to every move on the world stage, and we have to adjust to those realities. Now, we will have ample opportunity to discuss the ramifications with President Nixon when he is my guest for all 4 hours on Thursday. We'll pause now and be back the next hour.
You're listening to the Kennedy program on the World News Network.